Sarah's grandmother's century-old cabin was being demolished at dawn by HOA bulldozers. What they didn't know, the cabin was protected by state law, and their corrupt president had been stealing funds for years. Sarah's revenge would destroy their lives and transform an entire community forever. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The sound of bulldozers at dawn was not what Sarah Martinez expected to hear on her grandmother's birthday. She rushed outside in her pajamas, coffee mug still in hand, only to find her family's century-old cabin being torn apart by massive yellow machines. The morning air was thick with dust and diesel fumes as the demolition crew worked with ruthless efficiency. "Stop. What are you doing?" she screamed, running toward the demolition crew, her bare feet cutting on the scattered debris that had once been her grandmother's front porch. A man in a hard hat and clipboard approached her, his face showing no emotion. "Ma'am, please step back for your own safety. This structure is being demolished by order of the Willowbrook Homeowners Association. We have all the proper permits." "That's impossible. This cabin has been in my family for 4 generations. My great-grandfather built it with his own hands in 1925. The foreman shrugged, clearly uncomfortable but determined to do his job. "Take it up with the HOA lady? We're just following orders." The demolition notice was posted legally. Sarah's hands shook violently as she pulled out her phone to call the HOA office. Her heart pounded as she watched another wall of her childhood memories crumble to the ground. Margaret Chin, the HOA president, answered with her typical cold, administrative tone. "Ms. Martinez, your grandmother's cabin violates multiple HOA regulations. It's an eyesore that brings down property values for the entire neighborhood. The board voted unanimously for immediate demolition. But my grandmother is 89 years old. She built this cabin with my grandfather after they got married in 1962. It's been her home for over 60 years. You can't just destroy someone's life like this. The structure doesn't meet current building codes, aesthetic standards, or setback requirements." The demolition order was approved unanimously by the board after proper legal procedures were followed. "You can't just tear down someone's home without proper notice. This is illegal. We sent a certified letter 3 weeks ago to the property address," Margaret replied smugly. "If your grandmother failed to respond or take corrective action, that's not our responsibility." Sarah felt physically sick as she watched her grandmother's rose garden being crushed under the bulldozer tracks. Her grandmother had been in the hospital for the past month after a serious fall that broke her hip. All mail had been forwarding to Sarah's address, but she never received any HOA letter about demolition. By noon, the cabin was completely gone. For generations of memories, family photographs, handmade furniture, and irreplaceable heirlooms reduced to a pile of splintered wood and broken dreams. The lot looked like a war zone. Sarah drove straight to the hospital, her mind racing with anger and disbelief. She found her grandmother, Elena, sitting in her hospital bed, staring out the window at the gray November sky. When Sarah explained what had happened, the elderly woman's weathered face crumpled like tissue paper. "Mija, that cabin was where I said goodbye to your grandfather when the cancer took him. Where your mother took her first steps across the kitchen floor. Where you learned to read sitting in my lap by the fireplace." Elena's voice broke completely, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Sarah held her grandmother's fragile, arthritic hands, feeling the weight of generations of loss. "I'm going to fix this, abuela. I swear on grandfather's grave I'm going to make this right." The next morning, Sarah took a week off work and researched everything she could about HOA laws, property rights, and demolition procedures. She spent hours at the law library, called every attorney she could find, and dove deep into state housing codes. What she discovered made her blood boil. Her grandmother's cabin had been built in 1925, decades before the HOA existed. Under state law, it was a grandfathered structure, with full protection from any HOA regulations. The association had absolutely no legal authority to demolish it. She also discovered that proper demolition notice required certified mail with return receipt requested, plus posted notice on the property for at least 30 days. The HOA had done neither correctly. They had violated multiple state and federal laws. Sarah called Margaret Chin immediately, her voice shaking with controlled rage. "Mrs. Chin, you and your board made a catastrophic legal mistake. My grandmother's cabin was built in 1925 and was fully protected under state grandfathering laws. You had absolutely no legal right to demolish it." Margaret's voice remained ice-cold and dismissive. "That's unfortunate, but what's done is done. The structure was an eyesore that hurt everyone's property values anyway. Your grandmother should have maintained it better." You're going to rebuild it exactly as it was, using the original blueprints, or I'll sue you, the entire HOA board, and every member personally for everything you own." Margaret actually laughed, a cruel sound that made Sarah's skin crawl. "Good luck with that, sweetie. We have the best lawyers in the county on retainer. Your little family can't touch us." Sarah hung up, her determination growing stronger with every breath. She spent the next week documenting everything, taking hundreds of photos of the destruction, collecting witness statements from shocked neighbors, and making copies of every relevant law the HOA had violated. Then she made a discovery that changed everything. While researching HOA financial records at the county courthouse, Sarah found evidence that Margaret Chen had been systematically embezzling HOA funds for years. The expensive landscaping projects and emergency repairs were actually payments to her husband's construction company for work that was never performed. The fake invoices totaled over $300,000 in stolen community funds over 5 years. Sarah also discovered that 3 other elderly residents had their properties illegally demolished in the past 2 years. All were too intimidated, too poor, or too sick to fight back against the HOA's bullying tactics. Instead of going straight to expensive lawyers, Sarah decided to try a different approach. She would build a coalition of victims and expose the corruption publicly. She visited each affected family personally, spending hours listening to their stories of harassment and loss. First was Harold Peterson, whose antique tool shed had been demolished while he was in another state caring for his dying wife. The 78-year-old veteran was too afraid and broken to fight the HOA's intimidation tactics. "They said they'd fine me thousands of dollars every day if I complained," he told Sarah sadly, his hands shaking as he showed her photos of the destroyed shed. "That shed contained my father's tools from when he built houses after World War II. Irreplaceable family history gone forever." Next was Mrs. Kim, a recent widow whose beautiful garden greenhouse had been demolished without warning. She had been growing vegetables to feed her large extended family and share with elderly neighbors who couldn't garden anymore. "I couldn't afford a lawyer to fight them," she explained through tears, her English still heavily accented. "They said it was too close to the property line, but I had permits for everything. 20 years of growing my children's favorite vegetables, destroyed in one morning." The third victim was the Rodriguez family. Their children's elaborate playhouse had been demolished while both parents were at work. Their 8-year-old daughter Maria had cried for weeks and still woke up with nightmares. "She keeps asking why the mean people took away her castle," Rosa Rodriguez explained, her own eyes filling with tears. "My husband built that playhouse over 3 summers. It was where she learned to read, where she played princess, where she felt safe." Sarah realized this wasn't just about her grandmother's cabin. This was about a systematic pattern of bullying, corruption, and illegal behavior that had traumatized multiple families and destroyed irreplaceable family treasures. She organized a community meeting at the local church, personally inviting every affected family and their neighbors. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood's informal networks. The night of the meeting, over 60 people showed up, filling every chair and lining the walls. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," Sarah told the gathered crowd, her voice carrying the authority of righteous anger. "We're fighting to protect our entire community from people who abuse their power to hurt innocent families." Mrs. Kim stood up shakily, supported by her teenage son. "I was too scared to speak up before, but if we're all together, maybe we can stop them from hurting more families." Mr. Peterson nodded vigorously. "They can't intimidate all of us if we stand together. I'm tired of being afraid." Sarah shared her extensive legal research with the group, explaining exactly how the HOA had violated state and federal laws. She also revealed the evidence of Margaret Chen's embezzlement, which had cost the community over $300,000 in stolen funds that should have been used for legitimate improvements. "We need to contact the state attorney general's office and file both civil and criminal complaints," Sarah explained. "We also need to demand a complete independent audit of all HOA finances going back 5 years." The room buzzed with excited energy. For the first time in years, these intimidated families felt hope and the power that comes from unity. Sarah's friend Maria Santos, a paralegal with experience in civil rights cases, volunteered to help prepare all the legal documents pro bono. Another neighbor, Tom Williams, who worked as an investigative reporter for the local news station, offered to cover the story and expose the corruption publicly. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a retired professor who had been quietly documenting HOA abuses for years, came forward with a thick folder of evidence she had been collecting. "I've been waiting for someone brave enough to lead this fight," she told Sarah. Within days, the story exploded across local media. HOA destroys protected historic cabin in illegal demolition, was the front-page headline that appeared on every newspaper in the county. Tom's television investigation revealed the full scope of the corruption and abuse. The news coverage quickly went viral on social media, bringing even more victims forward from other neighborhoods. Apparently, Margaret Chen's tactics were being copied by HOA boards across the region, creating a network of corruption and intimidation. Sarah received a call from Elena Rodriguez, a prominent civil rights attorney who specialized in HOA abuse cases and had been following the story. "I've been practicing law for 20 years, and this is one of the worst cases of systematic abuse I've ever seen," Elena said. "I'd like to represent your grandmother and all the other victims pro bono. This kind of organized cruelty needs to be stopped permanently." Margaret Chen tried desperately to control the damage. She held a press conference claiming the demolitions were necessary for community safety and property values, but her obvious lies only made the story bigger. But it was too late. The state attorney general's office launched a full criminal investigation into the embezzlement charges. The county building inspector admitted he had been pressured to approve questionable demolition permits and promised full cooperation with investigators. The breakthrough came when Sarah's research uncovered the HOA's comprehensive insurance policy. Because all the demolitions were completely illegal, the insurance company was legally required to pay for complete restoration of every destroyed structure, plus punitive damages. Even better, because Margaret Chen had lied to the insurance company about the legal status of the buildings in order to get coverage, she was now facing additional federal fraud charges on top of the embezzlement. The insurance settlement was massive. $500,000 to rebuild Elena's cabin exactly as it was, plus additional funds for the other family's losses and emotional distress. The total payout exceeded $2 million. But Sarah wasn't finished seeking justice. Her investigation discovered that Margaret Chen owned several expensive rental properties in the neighborhood that she had purchased using stolen HOA funds. The Attorney General's office seized these properties as evidence, freezing all her assets. The criminal investigation revealed that Margaret Chen had been running the HOA like her personal criminal empire for over 5 years. She had stolen money, falsified official documents, intimidated elderly residents, and systematically harassed anyone who questioned her authority. 6 months after the demolition, construction began on Elena's new cabin. Sarah insisted on using the original 1925 blueprints she found in the county records, and even located salvaged materials from other period homes to ensure complete historical authenticity. Elena cried tears of joy when she saw the first walls going up. "It's going to be even more beautiful than before," she told Sarah, squeezing her granddaughter's hand. The rebuilding became a powerful community effort that brought neighbors together. Mrs. Kim designed an even more elaborate garden around the cabin. Mr. Peterson built custom furniture using techniques his father had taught him. The Rodriguez family painted a beautiful mural depicting the cabin's history on one interior wall. Margaret Chen was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for embezzlement, fraud, and civil rights violations. The entire HOA board was removed and replaced with elected residents who actually cared about the community rather than personal power. The new HOA board immediately implemented strict transparency rules, resident rights protections, and financial oversight procedures. They also established a special fund to help elderly residents maintain their properties instead of targeting them for violations. Sarah was unanimously elected as the new HOA president. Her first official act was to create a historic preservation committee to identify and protect all older structures in the neighborhood from future abuse. The story gained national attention when it was featured on a popular news magazine show. Sarah used the platform to advocate for comprehensive HOA reform legislation, which was eventually passed in their state and copied by 12 other states. Elena moved back into her perfectly rebuilt cabin on her 90th birthday. The whole neighborhood celebrated with a massive block party that drew hundreds of people and local media coverage. "Mija," Elena told Sarah as they sat together on the new porch watching children play in the yard, "your grandfather would be so proud. You didn't just save our cabin. You saved our whole community and showed everyone that ordinary people have extraordinary power when they stand together." Sarah smiled, watching the children play in the same yard where her grandmother had once played as a young bride in 1962. "Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the catalyst for the best things we can do for others, abuela." The cabin looked exactly as it had before the destruction, but it meant so much more now. It represented the power of community solidarity, the importance of standing up to bullies and corruption, and the incredible strength that comes from helping others fight injustice. Mrs. Kim brought fresh vegetables from her new, even larger greenhouse. Mr. Peterson had carved a beautiful wooden sign that read, "The Elena Martinez Historic Cabin St. 1925, rebuilt 2024, a symbol of community strength." The Rodriguez children had drawn dozens of pictures of the cabin to hang inside as permanent decorations. Sarah kept detailed records of everything that had happened during their fight for justice. She wrote a comprehensive book about the experience, donating all proceeds to a legal aid fund specifically for elderly residents facing HOA abuse across the country. Margaret Chen's trial became a precedent-setting case studied in law schools. Courts across the country began using it as the primary example of what happens when HOA boards systematically abuse their power and violate residents' rights. The insurance company paid additional settlements for emotional distress to all affected families, recognizing the psychological trauma caused by the illegal demolitions. Elena used her portion to establish a scholarship fund for local students studying law, social justice, or community organizing. 2 years later, Sarah received a heartfelt letter from a family in Oregon. Their HOA was trying to demolish their grandfather's workshop, and they had read about Elena's case online. "We know fighting seems impossible when you're just one family against a powerful organization," they wrote, "but your grandmother's story gave us hope and courage that we can fight back too and win." Sarah smiled and immediately picked up the phone to offer advice and support. She had learned that the fight for justice never really ends, but she also knew that ordinary people could create extraordinary change when they had the courage to work together and never give up. Elena's cabin still stands today, stronger and more beautiful than ever. But more importantly, it stands as an enduring symbol that no one is truly powerless when they have the courage to stand up for what's right and the wisdom to lift others up along the way. The neighborhood has become a nationally recognized model for positive community cooperation and effective HOA governance. Property values actually increased significantly after the corrupt board was removed and residents began working together constructively instead of living in fear and division. Sarah often sits on her grandmother's porch in the quiet evenings, thinking about how one terrible day of destruction led to so much positive change and community healing. She has learned that sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the powerful catalyst for the best things we can do for others and for justice.